welcome. You're watching Nimasa this week. My name is Iretiola Doyle. Now on today's edition, we'll be taking a more detailed look at the cabotage law. It promises to be very enlightening, so do stay tuned. It is our avowed goal on this program to keep you informed and up to date on issues germane to the maritime trade. Now, cabotage is probably the most significant singular issue in the maritime matrix. Our field correspondent, Charles Ohaoku, prepared this short prologue on the day's subject.
The implementation of the cabotage law, which came into force in May 2004, remains the overriding concern of the federal government through the instrumentality of the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, Nimasa. This concern actually derives from concerted efforts targeted primarily at providing an enabling environment for Nigerian stakeholders to thrive in. In the course of time, these local players are expected to monopolize trading activities in the country's coastal and inland shipping waterways. The legal structure in question, which superintends over all the activities of Nimasa in respect of the implementation of the cabotage scheme, is the Coastal and Inland Shipping Cabotage Act of 2003. Nimasa's activities in respect of its cabotage mandate are programmed to 1. Enforce total compliance with the letters and spirit of the cabotage law among all stakeholders operating within the country's maritime sector. 2. Administer waivers in respect of approving non-Nigerian interests to operate services where local players lack the capacity or the capability to provide them. 3. Administer or coordinate the generation and disbursement of the Cabotage Vessel Financing Fund, CVFF, to deserving local stakeholders. 4. Collaborate with stakeholders in the local content policy development. 5. Monitor shipping and maritime operations at all the country's jetties and terminals, as well as keep record of same and the nature and scope of their activities. The agency maintains regular surveillance to identify upcoming cabotage infrastructure and facilities. 6. Nimasa also carries out regular sensitization of the Nigerian public on the economic opportunities inherent in the country's domestic shipping trade. Finally, the agency has intensified efforts towards the expansion of existing shipbuilding and maintenance facilities in the country, as well as the development of new shipyards in order to enhance local capacity to build vessels in Nigeria.
Now that we believe that you have some grasp of what cabotage is all about, next up is this week's feature, complete with detailed clarifications from the people that regulate it here in Nigeria, the dedicated team of the Cabotage Department of Nimasa.
The consensus among stakeholders is that the cabotage law, when fully implemented, will greatly enhance Nigeria's status as a leading maritime nation. Barrister Ibrahim Zailani, the Executive Director of Maritime Labour and Cabotage at Nimasa, had this to say about the intentions of the law.
The Cabotage Act is anchored on 4 legs: ownership, manning, built, and registered in Nigeria. So how do we achieve that? Because I want to give you a little bit of history. The Cabotage Act is fashioned after the Jones Act of the United States of America. And what they do is they restrict participation of trade within their coastal areas to only Americans. So for us in Nigeria, we borrowed a leaf from the Cabotage Act, and what we seek to do is that all vessels engaged in coastal trading or inland shipping must be owned, must be registered, must be manned, and must be built in Nigeria. So by that, you will find that you are building capacity for your people. Because if you leave it open, foreigners will come and they will corner all these businesses. And by that, you are exposing your country.
Many Nigerian stakeholders, while appreciating the laudable intentions of the law, however, expressed their misgivings about their ability to compete with foreign-owned vessels that currently dominate the trade.
In the last 5 years, the quality of ships that appear on our anchorages are no longer the kind of ships that we used to have before. The average age of tankers in our port anchorages today, foreign tankers, is 3 years old. So today, I can count over 25 ships that were built in 2011 that are here carrying cargoes and competing with Nigerian ship owners. Not a problem. Let them operate. We need the foreign ship owners to transfer the technology to us. But there must be a level playing field. And for that level playing field to be determined, strict criteria of operation has to be put on the table for everybody to see.
However, Nimasa, ever conscious of its mandate through the Director General, Mr. Ziakede Patrick Akpobolo-Kemi, has reiterated its total commitment to the indigenous stakeholder in the maritime industry.
Honestly, with the way and speed with which I want to do things to happen in Nimasa and in the maritime sector, if that speed is followed from all the other agencies, arms of governments, and parastatals, what we can achieve 20 years can be achieved in 2-3 years.
ISAN, Indigenous Ship Owners Association of Nigeria, we're already meeting with them, whereby we've told them, because their main problem is to be able to get contract, to be able to compete with the IOCs, that is the international oil organizations. So what we intend to do is to be able to see that we see how we can be able to get them contract. And by doing that is, we have already told them to bring up almost of their vessels. We get these vessels repaired for them under the CVFF fund. Repair the vessels and then be able to get the IOCs to tell us the specification of the kind of vessels that they want. And then we repair the vessel for them and then ensure that the IOCs are able to give them contract, so that they are going to be the first refusal once we're able to do that, so that the IOCs will ensure that they give contracts to them at every point in time.
In concrete terms, though, the cabotage law has some built-in clauses that are aimed at empowering the Nigerian interest in cabotage.
The law provides that for every contract executed by any shipping company under coastal trade, 2% of that contract value is set aside as cabotage vessel financing fund, otherwise called CVFF. What we do is we set this amount aside, and the intention is that this same amount should be given back as loan to indigenous ship owners in order to empower them and improve their capacity so that they can own more vessels.
The peculiar nature of Nigeria's economy that relies almost entirely on oil and gas, and the fact that the bulk of oil and gas activities are carried out in the maritime domain, further underscore the strategic importance of the cabotage law.
The majority of the oil and gas activities are in the maritime domain. All the logistics supply, trading activities in the oil and gas activities are mostly done in offshore or within the maritime domain.
Cabotage is virtually the marine component of our local content. It serves as the vehicle to move to provide logistics support to the oil and gas industry. Without cabotage, without the marine component, is virtually as good as not having the oil and gas industry, because it's very dependent on all exploration and production activities that are being carried out offshore, are very much dependent on vessels, supply vessels, offshore support vessels, tugs, anchor handling tugs, and so on. So they move men and materials to the site for the exploration activities taking place in the offshore oil and gas sector.
After 8 years of the cabotage law, observers are of the opinion that the law, like any other, needs to be reviewed to reflect current realities within the maritime sector. Some areas appear to be in need of some tweaking.
Even by the structure of the law, we have made errors. You know, I told you, I said I was one of those guys that anchored the bill. But with the benefit of hindsight now, if I should review this bill, there are so many things I will remove. One is the requirement for a ship must be built in Nigeria. Me and you know that we do not build ships in Nigeria. And even if we do, can we meet our local demands? We cannot. So ab initio, putting that requirement is an error, but it's a learning process.
The amendment I would propose is like if we start looking at it like in time we graduate it. There are certain categories of vessels, GRT or GT, that could be manufactured or built rather in Nigeria by some of our indigenous shipyards here. Let's say vessels of less than 1,000 GT that serve as patrol boats. The act, instead of saying entirely every ship that will participate in cabotage must be built in Nigeria, if it can just graduate it in terms of tonnage, in terms of size, so that we can start from somewhere in view of our lack of indigenous capacity.
Nimasa is not under any illusions as to the enormity of the task ahead and has a clear understanding of what is required to get the job done.
We need more ships to be committed to the coastal trade and to be owned by Nigerians. 2, we need infrastructure. We need shipyards. We need repair yards. We need dockyards. Because currently in Nigeria, hardly can you dry dock a vessel. And dry docking a vessel, it means entire overhauling of a vessel. So if a vessel has been working for the past 10 years or 15 years, you need to dry dock that vessel. And honestly speaking, we are lacking in capacity.
An informed analysis of the issues confronting the maritime trade in Nigeria will point to finance as a panacea to the identified problems.
The cheering news about the CVFF is that so far, so good, because when we came on board, about $11 million had been collected. But today I can beat my chest and tell you we have collected over $130 million. And we're in the process of releasing the funds to Nigerians in order to improve their capacity.
It would seem, though, that a misconception exists about where Nimasa's operational emphasis should lie.
There is this wrong perception that cabotage is about revenue generation at all. Cabotage is not about revenue generation. Cabotage is about capacity building. They are concomitant in the sense that where we collect our 2%, we deploy the 2% to empower our local community, our local shipping community. But in essence, cabotage is about empowerment and capacity building. If we are doing well in terms of revenue generation, it means by implication that we are not so much succeeding in empowering Nigerians, because it means we are just collecting money. So I want to use this opportunity to say cabotage intention is to empower Nigerians. 1, by acquiring more vessels. 2, by cornering all the coastal trade and businesses. 3, by technology transfer.
That said, the entire Nigerian maritime business community is eager to access the Cabotage Vessel Financing Fund. But what is key to this desire is the modalities for accessing the fund and repayments.
The CVFF fund, the Act makes provision for PLIs to be appointed. When I mean PLIs, are permanent lending institutions, and that is the banks. We've been able to appoint 4 banks to be able to manage that fund. And the banks are as follows: Sky Banks, Diamond Bank, Fidelity Bank, and then Sterling Banks. And these funds are domiciled with these banks. So what we do, we have already received almost about 150-something applications. We send these applications to the 4 PLIs. These 4 PLIs are the ones that are going to appraise the applications to see if look at each application on its merit. and then recommend to us, because the banks are 100% liable to it. So so far, we have gone far with the CVFF fund. The banks, the PLIs have come to the executive management, they have done their presentation on it, and also the banks have also gone to the Honorable Minister, have done his presentation on it. So now it is now left to us to be able to make the final recommendation to the Honorable Minister for approval.
There are, however, some bright spots on the horizon for indigenous operators. Recently, an ultra-modern vessel was acquired by an indigenous operator. The vessel was named MV African Vision. The management team of Nimasa were conducted on a facility tour of the vessel by the vessel owners.
We went in and visited African Vision a couple of weeks ago. It is an indigenous company and it is flagging Nigerian flag, which is wonderful. And then they, on their own, assess this fund through Skybank. Skybank 100% fund that vessel. So my advice again to indigenous companies that they should go ahead, because most of these 4 banks, they already have maritime decks. And then the maritime decks will be able to give them loan to assess, to be able to purchase vessels and all that. Even though vessels is capital intensive, I'll say that. But still yet, they can try it. Not waiting for only the CVFF, because the CVFF fund is not that much. We can only be, right now we have gotten a recommendation for only about 12 vessels. So after that one is being disbursed, we still have to wait for the fund to be accumulated before we give another disbursement.
It is clear to all discerning operators in the maritime sector that Nimasa is not only alive to its strategic responsibilities to the Nigerian economy, but is indeed poised to usher Nigeria into the age of maritime ascendancy.
Very enlightening, you'll agree. Now, Nimasa this week will continue with our news segment. Today's news segment begins with a report on the issue of piracy and armed robbery on our high seas.
The Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, Nimasa, has completed a draft bill on piracy and other unlawful acts at sea aimed at fighting piracy and armed robbery at sea. Nimasa has presented the bill to critical stakeholders at 2 workshops in Lagos and Port Harcourt. Director General of Nimasa, Ziakede Patrick Akpobolokemi, is of the opinion that the bill will provide legal backing to the fight against piracy and other acts of sea criminality in order to curb the financial losses which, according to him, are in excess of $3 billion. He noted that the draft bill, which was put together by the agency's consultants, the IMO technical consultants, and the legal team of Nimasa, entails the review of the existing UN conventions of 1982 and 1988 as they relate to piracy. The DG further revealed that Nimasa, being the focal point for the implementation of relevant maritime conventions on safety and security in Nigeria, engaged the services of Mr. Mike Igbokwe, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, to articulate and produce a comprehensive maritime security bill, which he hopes stakeholders will make meaningful contributions to before it is sent to the National Assembly for enactment.
In furtherance of the objectives of the Cabotage Act, a Nigerian-owned shipping company recently acquired an ultra-modern vessel. Here is that report as prepared from our studios.
The management of marine platforms, an indigenous maritime operator, recently invited the senior management of Nimasa to inspect their newly acquired vessel named African Vision. The vessel is arguably the most sophisticated vessel acquired by a Nigerian-owned company. Marine Platforms informed Nimasa this week that the $89 million vessel was wholly financed by a Nigerian bank and flies the Nigerian flag. The Director General of Nimasa, Mr. Ziakede Patrick Akpobolokemi, who led the team from Nimasa, was full of praises for the management of Marine Platforms. The vessel's master showed off some of the ultra-modern facilities on the vessel to the Nimasa team. African Vision is expected to be officially commissioned very soon by the Honorable Minister of Petroleum Resources. The acquisition of the vessel is regarded as a good omen for other indigenous maritime operators and is expected to herald a new era for the Nigerian ship-owning fraternity.
Finally, on our news update, we bring you the Maritime Cargo Report. It's a breakdown of cargo in ships expected to berth in ports within the Lagos Pilotage District this week. Now, this report is brought to you courtesy of the Shipping Development Department of Nimasa.
24 motor tanker vessels are expected to berth in the Lagos Pilotage District this week. 10 vessels have PMS petrol on board. 8 vessels have Jet A1 aviation fuel on board. 4 vessels have AGO diesel on board. 1 vessel has DPK kerosene on board, while 1 vessel has ethanol on board. There are also 22 motor vessel cargo ships expected to berth within the Lagos Pilotage District. 13 vessels of this number have rice on board. 2 vessels have bulk malt on board. 3 vessels have frozen fish on board. 1 vessel has bulk sugar on board. 1 vessel has fertilizer on board. 1 vessel has soda ash on board, while 1 vessel is conveying general cargo.
And that is the news update on Nimasa this week. Now, if you recall, last week we encouraged you to send in your comments or questions so we can make this program more interactive. I'm pleased to say that we received a few. Our first comment is from Bolaji Akinola, who is the CEO of Ships and Ports in Lagos. And he says, I want to commend Nimasa for this bold step of reintroducing its weekly TV program. The last edition was particularly instructive in exposing viewers to the efforts the agency is making in developing human capacity in the maritime sector. The establishment of institutes in Nigerian universities for these trainings is a welcome idea which should be supported by all stakeholders. Our second comment comes from Nnamdi Buaja, who resides in Enugu, and he says, your TV program is very good. A lot of us do not know the activities and functions of Nimasa, but with this program, we should be able to understand and appreciate the agency better. Keep up the good work. And finally, we have a question coming from John Dixon, who resides in Lagos. And his question reads, what is Nimasa doing to enforce the implementation of the Cabotage Act in order to eliminate foreigners in our coastal trade? The answer is, the provisions of the Cabotage Act presently makes it difficult to completely eliminate foreigners from our coastal trade. However, the law is being considered for amendment in the National Assembly, and Nimasa has made its input to make the law more effective. Nimasa is also planning to organize an all-inclusive stakeholders forum on the implementation of the Cabotage Act in September this year, which will include oil majors, shipping companies, and other operators in the industry, and draw up an MOU on the implementation which the agency will enforce to the letter. We'd like to thank you very much for your comments and your questions, and we encourage you to keep them coming. Just send them to the email addresses showing on your screen. Now, that's our edition for this week. I hope you found it very enlightening. Until I see you again, same time, same station, I'm wishing you smooth sailing and bon voyage.